Welcome to the Clearly Christian Podcast with Dr. Cy Smith. It's time to know more so you can say no more. It's time for the Clearly Christian Podcast. Here's your host, Dr. Cy Smith.
I'm Dr. Cy Smith, and this is Clearly Christian, a podcast about what it means to see the world from God's perspective and the impact this has for training the next generation to live a life consistent with the biblical worldview. If you've been listening for a while and you like the show, again, I'd encourage you to hit the subscribe button and leave a review. That'll let others know that the show's worth listening to and certainly help us advance the cause of Christian education. In the best-selling book Unreasonable Hospitality by Will Guidara, owner of the world's #1 ranked restaurant, Will asserts that the bigger and more successful an organization becomes, the smaller it has to act. It will be a personal approach that gives you the opportunity to grow, and you can't lose this dynamic along the way. Well, our guest today is Mr. Darin Long. He's the superintendent of one of the largest Christian schools in America, the Christian Academy of Louisville school system. Cal, as it's often referred to, enrolls almost 3,000 students on multiple campuses in both Kentucky and Indiana. Darin brought a business mindset to a large Christian organization, but effective leadership at this level doesn't look like you might think. In fact, it is very personal, and I look forward to hearing from Darin in our conversation today about getting bigger and acting smaller. Unreasonable Hospitality is essentially a leadership book. The author lays out the principles he used to elevate ordinary transactions into unforgettable experiences. He wrote that he pursued a seemingly impossible goal in his business, and that was to create a space that embodied both excellence and hospitality. And in doing so, he discovered that while his product must be excellent, it was the experience of both his customers and employees that truly led to unparalleled success. He notes that leaders must do everything at their disposal to make both the customers and the employees feel seen and heard, to give them a sense of belonging, and to create a relational environment where they can connect with others. So by taking the time to truly listen and understand others' needs and wants, and then learning to be proactive and intentional about creating experiences that are highly personal, people receive more than they expect, and then they feel valued, they feel taken care of, and that they belong. Well, obviously, these are great practices, and they're certainly applicable across industries. And as I thought about what we do in Christian schools, I asked myself, what happens when we're relentless in our pursuit of excellent education while providing an extraordinary partnership with families? Can we provide an unforgettable experience for students and parents that is not only high quality, but is highly personal, such that they feel truly cared for and valued? Well, with hundreds of families, and in the case of Cal, thousands of students sitting in our classrooms, can we really tackle such a challenge in schools? As I've mentioned on this show many times, great Christian schools are growing substantially in this cultural moment. And the challenge of leading a school with a business mindset is new for many CEOs and boards. So is it possible to act small as a school as you get bigger? And how do we get hundreds of teachers and employees on the same page? What might this mean for how we approach communication and the systems we use to drive behavior in our organizations? Well, this is what we want to talk about with our guest today, Darin Long, because this is the world he lives in. He leads, again, one of the country's largest Christian schools, and yet he prioritizes people, and he's intentional about truly listening to his constituents to uncover their needs and wants. So let's dig in. So Darin, again, welcome to the Clearly Christian Podcast.
Well, thank you, Cy. I'm so excited to be here. I know in our relationship over the years, I love sitting down with you and talking about something that's dear to our hearts, which is Christian education. And so that's what I'm hoping to do today.
Awesome. Good. Well, again, it's great. Yep, we've served on many accreditation teams together. And again, he's the superintendent of the Christian Academy School System of Louisville, and his path to education leadership began in the sporting goods retail industry. I know we're going to talk about that. He worked there for 9 years before God called him into education. So for those of us who've been lifetimers in this field, that is a fascinating background. I can't wait to hear what you have to say about that. And since that time, then, he spent more than 26 years serving in both public and Christian schools. And now now his leadership influence extends far beyond, of course, Christian Academy of Louisville. He serves on the ACSI Accreditation Commission, and that's where we've spent a lot of time together. We certainly enjoy those experiences. ACSI Kentucky State Representative for, again, ACSI, an exemplary council member, Kentucky non-public commission member, and a part of the Ed Choice Kentucky board member there. So, again, great experiences and all great, again, achievements and accomplishments. And I know you've earned all of those things. So, again, it's an honor to talk with you today. So thanks so much. And as I thought about, again, this episode, and we talked, behind the scenes and just prepping for some of this, I realized, again, you do have an extraordinary and very unique background that you bring to this particular marketplace. And you're in that, again, that business field for several years. So tell us about your position there. What'd you do? And again, as you transition then into education, maybe just some of the things you look back and say, boy, I didn't know that was going to carry over as well as it did, or that didn't carry over at all.
Right. Well, you use the word extraordinary. I don't know if I would use that word. It's a path that you're on, when you're focused. And but that's what's great about God. He's using different pieces of it at different times in these seasons of life. But yeah, actually, when I came out of college, I actually graduated with a bachelor's of business management and started immediately into sporting goods retail, running these big box sporting goods stores and kind of working my way up as a 22-year-old. End up managing in 8 stores in 6 different states. Including being a store manager of 4. But wow, the things that I was able to learn in that industry was amazing. Number one, that you talked about in your opening, is customer service. You can't be successful in retail without focusing on the customer. But things like human resources, hiring, recruiting, understanding how to analyze your competition, market trends, budgeting, purchasing, facilities management, big events in the community. Forecasting, how do you create teams? Every bit of that was a great experience for those 9 years. And then, looking back now, because I'm a little bit older, but looking back now at that season of life and then going into public education and what I was able to do as a teacher and as an administrator and the training there, and then working my way through, Christian education, it's really cool to see that the whole time God was preparing me, what I believe for the calling now is to be superintendent. Everything that I did way back in the 90s in the retail industry, I'm using today. Never thought that would happen. It's definitely a calling of God. And I don't know about you, but growing up as a 4 or 5-year-old, I didn't aspire to be a superintendent, right? I wanted to be an astronaut and a cowboy, and I didn't get called to those either. But it's great how God's used everything that I've ever done to this point for this season that he needs me at. And I don't know how long that'll be, but it's wonderful to be in that position.
Yeah. Wow. Fascinating, man. You said a lot there, and we're definitely going to come back on all of those things, because you touched on them, the customer service, the HR, the marketing, all that, those things that are just, again, fascinating to those of us who just don't have that kind of background. And I said this on a prior show, Christian schools are a unique hybrid, and we just have to recognize that. And people like me have to hear it. You get it because you came from that background, but people like me have to be intentionally reminded, listen, you're an educational institution first, because that's why you exist, obviously, to give kids a good education. But then you're also a ministry. Yep, you get that, because you have a specific mission and you must make a difference in the lives of these students and families, or else why else would you exist? You might as well just get that free and appropriate public education someplace else. So you get the ministry angle, but you're also a business. And that's something that, like I said, that it's taken me years to really understand that. Although, like you said, once you get into that CEO role, or the superintendency, as we call it in educational circles, you earn that real quick, because you better, know budgets, and you better, learn how to track with some of these things. So, why is it so important for Christian schools, you think, to, with your experience, to really get this right and say, yep, you're more like a business than what you think?
Yeah, I think we have no choice but to get it right. I mean, based on our organizational mission statement, what we're telling employees and families, we have to be able to combine those things. And, it's funny you say that. I remember when I first went into education on the public side, there's a rub there. If you're a lifetime educator and someone starts talking about business, you're like, no, those things don't mix, right? But in Christian education, or in a non-public school, it very much is who we are. And having to balance those things. And so I think foremost, you got to remember, we say we're not a church, but we are a ministry, and we're really here to do one thing, that's build God's kingdom. And so we got to get that right. That's number one. That trumps everything. But the second piece of that you hit on is delivering an educational platform and an excellence, because that's how we build God's kingdom. That's our avenue. That's our platform. And then the third piece I think business really brings into it is that's biblical, right? Stewardship is biblical. And so we have to be good stewards, understanding that every dollar that we have coming in is God's dollar. And what we're trying to do is to build his kingdom by going through education. So it's all mixed. It's all intertwined. And the other thing, to borrow some things that maybe we do in the business world that's crossover is, strategic vision casting. We, as this organization, we have to know where we're going and everybody being on the same path. That's big in the business world. And I think schools are understanding that now. The stewardship piece we mentioned. But to me, lately, what I've really been thinking about is I have to leave this next generation that's coming, these new families, these new employees, a sound financial organization so they can continue to build God's kingdom. I can't just, hand it over and say, well, good luck. I need to leave it in the best shape that I can in order for them to continue the mission.
Yeah, that's a great point. You have to really think like an owner. And if I own this business, I want it to survive. I know we talked about that last year, and I can't remember what educational leader it was. Oh, I know. It was on a Craig Rochelle podcast. That's where we started talking about it, where, that owner mindset that, you leading whatever organization, you have to, you want to, you don't want this thing just to die with you. And no business would do that and say, well, this business only exists until I decide to retire. And then, of course, I hope the place just shuts down or I don't care or something like that. Even somebody who bought a business, you would never say that, right? No. You hope it's continued to be successful, not just for you, but for obviously your customers and your employees and this whole thing that you built. And so in schools, people like you and I and those of us leading schools, we have to have that same kind of that mindset. And I think the challenge on that particular episode was, can you get all of your employees to buy into that owner mentality, even if they don't have the title? Right. Can you get the third grade teacher and the food service worker and the gym monitor and all these other people who support staff? Can you get them to buy into that idea, exactly what you're saying, so that they'll have some of that care and that, desire to say, yep, I got to leave this place better than I found it for the next generation. So yeah, great points. Cal is so big. I mean, it's just incredible. I mean, we're pushing 900 here at MCS, and we're trying to figure out where to put everybody. And when I think about 3,000, because I probably undersold it, you're probably a little over 3,000 now, or at least there. So congratulations. It's just incredible. Multiple campuses. So, I mean, you, again, more than most. That's why I thought you were the perfect one for this particular topic. How does Cal look like a business in that sense? I mean, is this like a major company? You have more employees than some schools have students, right? I mean, how does it function? And what are some of those challenges for you?
Yeah, I guess to kind of frame it up. So you mentioned we're 2 campuses. We feel like we're really good at running campuses that are multi-level. So we go preschool to 12th grade at both campuses. You mentioned 2 states. That's a blast. That's sarcasm, because you're dealing with 2 different, especially during COVID, right? That was a lot of fun. But it's really, if you think about it, the way that we structure it, it's really like 8 schools, because each of the schools have their own principals, their own assistant principals, counselors, office staff. They just happen to be housed on 2 campuses. But, a lot of our opportunities and challenges are really the same as smaller schools. It's just larger scale in a sense. But being a system of multiple schools on 2 campuses does allow us to create some efficiencies. And when you want to talk about business terms, because we're blessed that because of that, these 8 schools working together from a financial standpoint, I can have multiple instructional coaches, right? That would be very difficult if you had a school of 300. Well, I get to have 4 of those that I can send out to all these schools. A larger and a very specific finance department or development office. And even think about leadership. If we were running these campuses as 2 independent schools, you would need 2 superintendents, 2 CFOs, 2 academic or curriculum, heads. So we can combine all that to create those efficiencies to really help the school system as a whole. And then even some areas where maybe one school doesn't meet its tuition goal or its enrollment goal, well, I've got 7 more that can pull the slack, so to speak. And so, yes, it's larger and it's a larger scale. Sometimes it means more zeros. Instead of 300 kids, it's 3,000. But some of the challenges are still there. I mean, we have one major revenue source. Every Christian school is the same way. It's tuition. right? But how do you use those and be the best steward of that? So yeah, so there is some combinations to a business. I wouldn't say it's a big business. We're still a school, we're still a ministry, but what we talked about a few minutes ago, it's all three of those combining.
Yeah, fascinating. Yeah, it's a great study and a great visit. So all of you listeners, you need to make a trip there to Cal sometime and watch this system work. Well, you kind of led into it really well in that one of the things the research says that that parents complain about at all school systems. Well, it doesn't matter if you're 300 kids at the little tiny school, neighborhood school down the street, or you're 3,000 kids at Cal. As parents say, man, we need better communication from the school. We want more meaningful communication. I don't hear enough about what's going on with my son or daughter, or the events there or something like that. How does Cal and you as a leader, that's a common complaint, and that's just American education in general. So how do you say, my word, we're a huge school system. How are we going to make sure that our customer feels seen and heard? And how do they get in touch even with you personally and this massive organization that is Cal?
Yeah. Great question. And you hit it right on the spot. It is, I think every school struggles with the same thing about communication and creating individual relationship building. With our size, I would tell you one of the biggest challenges is from the executive leadership standpoint. And I've struggled with it in my 5 years as superintendent. I used to be able to be right there with students every single day. And I know we do this as leaders. Once you leave the classroom, each step you take, you're one step away from the kids. And when you get to this level, it's the same thing. But think about this. I have 500 employees. And so if I have a 10% turnover rate, that's 50 new employees. Well, in 3 years, I've turned over 150. It's hard. And sometimes I feel the pressure. I can't know every one of them like I used to, about their families and follow up. I just don't see them that often. We have to bring in 350 new students a year just to maintain where we're at. And so to be able to build the relationships with those families, it's daunting to be able to do that. And I had to understand I can't do that, but that's what the organization does and how we do it. So there's other challenges there being a large school for sure, but those are the two, is the communication and the individual relationship. I mean, we could do a whole podcast if you want to know what challenges we have as a large school or multi-campus. But yeah, and think about this too. We want to have these 8 schools have their own cultures and traditions and nuances, but still have the same system continuity and same mission and same standards. And so there's a lot more pieces to it, but honing in on what you just mentioned that you set up so well is the communication piece. And then how do you go from this down to this?
Right. And I thought, the listeners might want to hear, what are some specific examples? Because I know one thing we've talked about, and I think it's fascinating, was this program that you have or a platform that you had that allows people to give you personal feedback. And I don't know if that's on an app. My apologies. I can't remember all the details. But every time you tell me about it, I'm like, wow, that's so great. But I know there's been it's taken a personal toll on you as well because it's burdensome in wanting to respond. But to give us a good example of what it means getting in touch with you and maybe even your team.
So our new strategic plan that we wrote in, the very first initiative, and I felt this was very important, is about creating authentic two-way communication with every stakeholder. So first of all, I have to identify your stakeholders. In most schools, we have 6 or 7 stakeholders. But how do you do that two-way authentic? And so that's what I've been challenging myself and our staff is how do we do that? I can send out a video and email all day long, right? But that's just that one-way communication. And so we've been looking at different ways to do it. School improvement teams, which I know a lot of schools do, that gives you good information back. Grandparent clubs. I spoke to 55 grandparents on Monday and 35 yesterday. Man, you talk about great information and a perspective that they have. Nothing's more precious than your grandchild. Alumni councils and one-on-one meetings, intentionally walking around and talking to people. But what you hit on, I think I've been very excited about. So 2 years ago, we started doing monthly employee surveys so they could give us feedback back, and it could be anonymous. And that's been great because we've kind of structured each month. How are you doing this month? First of all, is this a good place to work? Score it. Well, it looks really good in September. It looks a lot different in February, but we know that, right? Challenges come. And then it swings back up. But we've been able to ask very pointed questions about benefits. The one that's been a huge one, and it has been both from a personal standpoint, organizational standpoint, a good thing and a challenge, is I found this company called Parent Pulse. And it allows us to do something called a trickle survey over 90 days. Sometimes you do one survey. Well, if the football team won Friday night, you'll get really good responses, right? If carpool was very bad, you won't get so good responses. And so it allows us to do so many per day. And then I did 2 of those this past year. I got 2,000 parent responses back to go through.
Wow.
And you're talking about great data. The other thing that's been wonderful about it is that, and I understand this, parents want to be anonymous, and I understand that, but it allows me to communicate with them even though they're anonymous, and I can keep their anonymity because I use a third party to email back to them. And so they'll have a comment and say, hey, really appreciate that. Could I ask you a few more questions about that to make us better? And so I've been able to have these communications back and forth. And so it's been wonderful. It's helped us to identify some misperceptions. And so I can go out and communicate where those may be wrong. For instance, I'll give you one. They came across that we can't keep teachers, that they turn them over all the time. So I went to HR and said, go back as far as you can go. So the last 20 years, we've averaged 11% over 20 years. So it's not. In these past 2 years, it's been 7 and 9. So how do I communicate that in a positive way? So that's been great information coming back. And then there's a lot of personal things that you have to work through as well.
Yeah, fascinating. And I think that's spot on. And as much as, like I alluded to, that, you might find it, burdensome because you hear and read things. They're like, wow, that's not us at all. How do they perceive that? But like you said, I think the anonymity is a factor because they know that, okay, I'm not going to hurt Darin's feelings. He doesn't know about this right now. And you're looking for patterns, right? You're just looking for, data sets, themes. I mean, if you get 2,000 responses, there's all these crazy outliers out there, I'm sure. And you just go, okay, I have to let that one go. I can't take that one to bed at night or I'll never get to sleep, right? But if out of 2,000, if 100 or 200 people say the exact same thing, now I know, okay, those are good red flags. That's a good model for, I think, some of our school leaders to hear and others to hear that, okay, you can do this even on a big scale. You just have to look for themes, and you probably have to do it in a more consistent way. Because you said, you can do this several times. I think you said it's progressive or there's steps or something like that, there's different ones you can do on a regular basis. Would those be daily or monthly? Or how often does a parent get one of those?
Yeah, so we end up sending out, so they told us on a national average, when you do surveys, you get about a 30 to 35% response rate. And these people know what they're doing. I got 37% response rate. So I got 2,000 back. So that gives you an idea how many I sent out in order to get that. And I had to learn, and I got warned. The first set is tough because you're reading every single comment. And what's human nature? 10 great ones. Oh, but there's one. I got to focus on the one, right? I can't believe they said that about my school, because it's very personal. But then you got to start looking at the larger. And it's been fun with our parents in the sense that I'll reach out to them. They'll go, oh, I didn't know you could talk to me about this. Right. And parents have gone, well, hey, Darin, it's Bill. Well, hey, Bill, can we sit down and talk? So there's been some positive things, but sometimes people just need an outlet. It's been from a maturing standpoint. I've had to, and I've learned this from another school, another ACSI school. They did an annual survey every May that they did for 20 years. And they said people just kind of had to have a way to say something, and they would wait for that survey. Well, I've learned that as well. They have to have an outlet. And so there's that piece too. So I'm learning as we do this. But I would tell you there's a new little thing out there that helps. It's called AI that helps you look at all this data and say, hey, tell me the 5 best teachers that are getting comments, or hey, what is 3 buckets that we could do better at? And so there's a lot of different ways to kind of digest it. And business has been doing this forever. It's something called a net promoter score. Businesses have been doing this for 25 years. All those little pop-up surveys you get, it's the exact same thing.
Yeah, that's exactly what I was just going to say, because it just kind of dawned on me that, I buy a lot of products online like a lot of other people do. And inevitably, the day or two later, what do I get? How'd you like this product? Would you be willing to fill out a survey and write a review for this product? And even if it's good, bad, or others, they want some feedback. And it can be 1 star, it can be 5 stars. It doesn't matter if it's at Amazon or Dick's Sporting Goods or Macy's or wherever else. They all do it, right? And so they're constantly looking for feedback, patterns, themes, things like that. And those things, as you know, I mean, I guess kudos to those companies. They're pretty transparent. They put that stuff out there, unless, of course, there's some major, FCC red flags. I mean, there's certain things you can't say, obviously, but they put that stuff right on the website for everybody to see. Hey, here's a terrible review of this particular product. And we just put it out there. Schools, again, you're talking like you're from another planet when you talk about, wait a minute, we're going to let the customer do some of these reviews or give us potentially bad feedback that other people might see, or I'm going to have to read it. And oh my word, again, we just don't think like that. And that's one of those dynamics of business that is now coming around to education to say, it's not just about customer service, it's about customer engagement. And part of engaging with them is hearing both the good and the bad.
Well, and to get better, you have to know where those opportunities are. And if you just sit in your office and think, oh, this is probably what's happening, you can't always count on that, right? I mean, God may give you divine discernment, which we pray for, but you got to talk to the folks that's out there every day, the employees and the students and the families, and get that feedback back to make sure that you are headed in the right direction. So, yeah.
Yeah. And you said it there. What kind of feedback have you gotten from your employees? Because, again, it's a lot of people, but it's on a much smaller scale from your parents. But how does that make them feel in terms of the surveys they get? And they probably, since they see you more often, they're able to say, wow, this was enacted upon. The school did something about it as a result of my survey, or no, it was completely ignored. But what's employee feedback been like?
There again, it can be very emotional, right? Especially anonymous, but you have to be prepared for that, right? And sometimes they just, and sometimes they don't know what's coming to me. It's right. It's the organization, it's the email, right? And so they feel safe in doing that. And because we tell them, I'm not tracking it. I'm not looking for you to come find you. If you want to give your name, wonderful. There's been some very positive things. I'll give you just 2 quick anecdotes that we've learned from it, doing it for 2 years now. One of the things that we really want to do is pour into our teachers some way that they can become stronger spiritually, right? So how do you do that? Well, through this survey, we started reading some of these comments as, I'm just busy all the time. I don't have time to do that. I'm trying to do family, trying to do my church, trying to do my job. So we've created something called a spiritual enrichment day. So we're going to pay every employee, doesn't matter if you're hourly, faculty, doesn't matter where you are, every 2 years you can take a paid day off, doesn't count against you, if you want to go do something to build yourself spiritually or get closer to the Lord. If you want to go do an Emmaus walk, if you want to go serve, if there's a conference you want to go to, we want to back up what we're saying by providing that opportunity. That came out of those surveys. That was the whole idea that came out of that. Another one that popped up just this past year, which, sometimes you look at stuff and go, man, why didn't I think of that like 5 years ago? But, we give our employees personal days, right? They get 4 personal days out of 10. Well, for teachers, sometimes they don't want to take a day off, or they wait till the end of the year because they're going to lose it, right? Use it or lose it. Well, I don't like teachers being out in May. They don't like being out in May. Let's just pay them for it, right? If you don't use it, let's pay you for that day. It's a win-win. And, but that came out of the surveys. And so those are 2 just tangible things that has come out of these surveys that has really helped us to be able to look at those. But without having that communication and seeing it's a broader conversation than just one person, I don't know that we would identify it as quickly.
Yeah, that's great. Great. Let's talk about this idea of acting smaller, even as you get bigger. And by that, obviously, more personal and, how do we get in touch with these people, understanding their needs and wants and things like that. Is there anything that you really, or any systems you have in place that you really kind of say, hey, at Cal, if you're going to work for us, this is what we expect, any of those, in order to act smaller, like, this is how we drive behavior. So if you're going to be at Cal, whether you're in food service or you're a teacher, we want you to do this because this shows our people, that they matter. Yeah. Because I'm sure you've probably given a lot of thought to that and shows your board that how do we make sure people feel like they're that they belong and that they're recognized, because I'm sure a lot of people are like, oh, I don't know if I want my child to be one of 3,000. I mean, every parent wants to know that their kid gets individual attention, and oh, the teachers know my son's name, and that I matter. So is there anything that you do as a system to say, this is how we make sure our customers know that they are individually valued and recognized? And in other words, we want you to act smaller like this?
Yeah, I think, and I think everybody that's listening to this, there is no doubt the smallest level you have to be, and the most important level, is that teacher in the classroom with those kids. They have to understand that every one of those students in front of them is an image bearer of God. And so we have to back them up. I look at my job as the ultimate server. I'm here to do one thing, and that's to provide resources and ability for teachers to focus on those kids. That's the lowest level. That's what the parents want to know about. And so looking at a couple of different ways that we kind of, I don't know if you want to call it onboarding or helping people to understand that. So new employee orientation. We bring our new employees in, and so we had almost 50, almost 60 this year from all levels. It doesn't matter if it's teacher or cafeteria or facilities. We bring them together a couple of days before everybody comes back. Our first 3 hours is based on two things. Number one is we tell them what our mission statement is, how we're driven about it, does it mean, where does it come from, how do we define it? And then the second thing is that I always tell our employees is, I believe that every single one of them has been called by God to be here for this year for these students that we're going to have. And so the first thing that we do is we do something called heart stories. And so I give my heart story. How did I come to Christian education? How did I come to Christian Academy? And I tell a little bit about that story and how the Lord was working on me, and make it very personal. We have another principal or director that will share that as well. And then we let them sit in small groups and talk about, why are you here this year? How did you get here? Is there a story? Where did it come from? And so there's people with tears in their eyes telling the story of how God's brought them. We joke, some of them didn't even know they were going to be here 2 days ago because we just hired them, right?
Yeah. Right.
But there's some great stories about, it reminds us why we're here. Number one is because God's called us. And number two, we have a great responsibility with our mission is developing these students with a heart for God. And it doesn't matter where we are, what we're doing. So I think that really drills it down to an individual. What is my role? Yes, there's 500 employees, but my role is the same. It's the same as a superintendent. It's the same as the maintenance worker. It's the same as the high school teacher. We all have the same roles to pour into these kids and serve these families. The second thing we do for our teachers is called Call to Teach. It's a 3-year mentorship program. So whether you're a brand new teacher coming out of college or you're retired coming into Christian education, you're going to go through a 3-year mentorship program to learn about biblical immersion, to understand what it means like to teach in a Christian school, what we're trying to accomplish at that lowest level. So I think that's been a great addition as well. And so for an employee standpoint, yes, 500 employees, but it's all about singularly, what is your mission, what's your calling, and how do you fulfill that role? If everybody's doing it at that level, then I think the kids are getting that individual attention. I think the families are seeing it. So yeah, that's one piece. The parents is a whole nother way.
Yeah, right.
Yeah, I think one of the neatest things we did several years ago is I have one employee who's about parent relations. What does that mean, right? When we first came up with this idea, but she's already meeting with new families before school ever starts. She's doing popsicles on the playground. So all new families at this one school is getting together and creating a camaraderie between themselves. And these kids are getting to meet other kids that's going to be new, right? Our middle school, she takes them to one of these jump house things, high school is doing a big, pizza or a cookout. So putting them all together, and then she's creating this resource that it doesn't have to be the principal or it doesn't have to be someone else they're not sure about. They can call her and say, who do I talk to? And so that's been a win for us. And then we've created something called Christian Academy Foundations. And I actually borrowed this idea. A lot of schools, Si, you probably do it, but we were lacking of getting our new families on board immediately. We just kind of brought them in, said, welcome, and that's it, right? Welcome to Christian education, And so we've been a little bit more intentional. that we do one night, we do about a 90-minute presentation with all new families. We give them about 4 chances to come to it. But we're talking about things, first of all, what is Christian education? How is evangelical versus a covenant school? How is that different? How do we teach theology in the classroom? What is a three-way partnership between the home, the school, and the church?
Yeah.
How important is it to have to be in person with your family in church every week? That's a big deal for us. What are the expected student outcomes? What do you hope your child's going to be, whether they're here for 1 year or 13 years? And resources. And then we survey them at the end and say, what's your takeaways? And then that lets us know, did we hit our mark or we were just talking heads, right? And so, but we've got a lot of success from that. And we've only been able to do that the last 3 years. We talked about it for 10 years. It was always one of those things like, yeah, how do we do that? And we'll put that off. Larry Taylor with ACSI, when he was head of schools at Prestonwood, I mean, he did like a 3-night session. I was like, well, we can pull off 90 minutes if they can do three nights of it. So, but it was just one of those things of how do we, like you said, go from here down to here to provide that.
And is it mandatory for all new parents or?
Strongly suggested, because I'm
Gotcha.
worried about the word mandatory.
Right. Yes, that's
but
a
I said if we
challenge.
do it well enough, then it won't be a problem. People will talk about, hey, I went to that last year. And we invite the grandparents to come along if they want to. So we've had pretty good response to it, doing it that way.
Yeah, I love that. That's a great idea. Well, as I said in my opening, we can't forget the excellence piece here, because the author of that book does a good job of saying, listen, if the product's not any good, the customer, won't return. So even with unreasonable hospitality, I have to make sure I put a great meal right out in front of them. So we get that, and we know how that translates to schools is that, of course, they want to see excellence, delivered to their child. And if they don't feel that getting an excellent education, well, then they promptly, go someplace else. So what are some things that, you guys have done to Cal to make sure that, okay, yep, we want to make sure people feel valued and cared for, things like that. But we also are trying to really drive excellence and make sure the customer knows that you're getting an excellent education.
Yeah. I've always been a believer that excellence comes straight out of the Bible. You look at Colossians 3:23, work as you're working for the Lord and not for man. So every day I come in, I got to remember that's what I'm doing, and then make sure that messaging is going down to everybody else. So I think that is really, we're called to excellence, and be able to do that and provide that is huge. We have to constantly talk about our mission. I feel like that our organization is mission oriented, and it's driven by every decision we make. And I think that's huge, is setting the standard, so to speak, of where we want to be. If that's what we're striving, is to develop each student with a heart for God, who grow as Jesus did in wisdom, stature, and in favor with God and man, those 4 tenets, then that's our excellence. The goal's been set. So now how do we achieve it? And then getting everybody behind that, and then we're all working towards the same thing. And I think things built after that, strategic plans, expected student outcomes, those are all setting the bar pretty high. Will we achieve every one of those? No. We're humans living in a fallen world. There's no way. We're going to get it wrong sometimes. We have to be able to admit that as well. But it doesn't mean we don't strive for it. And so whether it's hiring and retaining really good teachers, whether it's going out and making sure we're getting the most aligned curriculum that we can, making sure that we're looking at the business side the best that we can, that we're honoring every single dollar that's spent and where it comes from. I think all of those are leading to excellence. And that goes down to, I think another thing, let me put it this way. If every kid's an image bearer of God, and they've all been given individual gifts, talents, and skills, and then the excellence is getting those kids to find out what that is and then getting them to the next level, right? So whether that's excellence in our fine arts program, in our art program, in our music, whether it's on the athletic field, whether it's in the classroom, whether it's in missions or serving, all of those have to be held to the same standard. Now, the trick, and you know this as well as everybody else that leads the school system, is saying it and then backing it up. And that's where the feedback comes in again, right? Are we?
Yeah.
Are we hitting it? Is there data? Data doesn't lie. How do we get that feedback from our alums? Did we get to the point that we said we would? And that's been a huge piece
Yeah.
as well. And so all that's important to make sure you're hitting the go. But there again, I think we're called to excellence by the Lord, and that's what pushes us and strives us each day.
Yeah, great point. And I like what you said there about the standards that you need to be hitting, because that's one of the key things with excellence is that, are there clear accountability measures in place, and say, this is our expectations. And then are we willing to step up and hold people accountable for that? And that really probably separates, your world from a lot of other worlds, because maybe if you're a staff of only, a couple of dozen teachers and things like that, accountability can be very personal, but it's also very hard, right? Whereas somebody like Cal says, listen, we don't have a choice. There's 500 employees. Here's the standard. We have to hold you accountable. There's a system to put that in place, and you've got to hit these marks, because if you don't, this big organization suffers. And so, we have to know really clear, are you hitting the mark or are you not? And so those accountability measures are big at a place like Cal, and bigger systems. I don't know if you figured it out, and I don't know if we have figured it out either, right? Because sometimes we still get it wrong, but you just know you have to. You can't kick that can down the road, because like I said, if they don't see excellence, then they leave. And you might, some other leader might say, well, yeah, what is he, so he's now down to 2,999 kids, right? Is that really going to make a budget difference? Doesn't work like that. It'll be, like you said, it'll be 50 to 100 kids who all share that same perspective and end up, checking out. Well, 30 seconds. What are some of your leadership priorities moving forward? What you got on the table?
Wow, that's a great question. I think it's right what we're doing. We've got a new strategic plan, and I absolutely love it. Just real quick, there's 6 tenets, and we're focused on that: is relationships, viability, accessibility for Christian families, biblical unity, defining it from our level and not letting the world do it. And what does that look like in the schools? Student growth. We're looking at both spiritually and academically, but getting them to own those two things, because that's a huge win. And then last is just continue to do and build leadership. We want to partner with Christian schools. We've been blessed. I mean, God has blessed the school system. Yeah. And we want to give back and make sure that we do it as much as possible, and also to protect Christian education. It's not about Christian Academy. It's about Christian education and building God's kingdom. So we're really pushing hard on our strategic plan right now. We're just 2 years in. I think we're going to take it to 5, and there's some accountability built into that we can talk about sometime. But that's where we're really focusing right now. And then still struggling with the communication and the personalization and making sure we're keeping that at the forefront and getting it right is more times than not is what we're trying to do.
That's right. Well, if you weren't, like I said, you wouldn't be a school of 3,000, right? So people must feel valued. They must feel like their voice is being heard, or you wouldn't continue to grow, right? And we know in this cultural moment, we're really hot. But still, even in this cultural moment, I know some schools that aren't doing so well, right? Because they're just not getting these things right. So kudos to you and your team. And I really wanted to ask that question because I know where you would go, and that is, I want the listeners to know how important it is to have someone, whether it's a single person or have a team of people, who's looking at the horizon. I mean, the first thing you said was, well, looking at our strategic plan, right? Well, there's so many of our peers and so many out there that a strategic what? They know about it, but they never take the time to do it because it sounds so lofty. It sounds so in the future. Well, yeah, it is. But that's really where you need to go. And somebody's got to have their head up, as opposed to head down all the time, have their head up looking on the horizon saying, this is who Cal wants to be, and this is where we want to be 3, 5, 10 years from now. How are we going to get there? What are the steps in place? We're not going to get there if we're not excellent. So how do we become excellent? We're not going to get there if we don't have better communication. So how do we do that? Blah, blah, blah. The fact that you're available to tackle that is just a huge win for Cal. And good schools do that. They give their leaders time on the horizon. And they say, you know what? Part of your job is to really, really look out for us down the road. And we appreciate that every once in a while you go to the lunchroom and you wipe off tables and, you do those things and you wipe noses. And we love that you're available to do that, but that's not in your job description. And we don't want you living there, man. We need you to do something no one else can do. So again, great stuff. Thanks so much for sharing those insights. They're big. If people want to know more about Darin Long and your work at Christian Academy of Louisville School System, how can they talk to you? How can they get in touch with you? Because I'm sure some might say, hey, listen, we're growing and we probably have some systemic questions about, how do you manage this? So what do you suggest they do?
Well, first of all, go to the webpage. It's easy. CA Schools, plural there, .us is great, but feel free to call the school. The email is always the best. So that would be dlong, L-O-N-G, at caschools.us. I don't know if we can put that in the comments or something, but we love giving back. We love sharing. Whenever schools come to visit, I tell them, let me tell you everything we've done wrong so you don't do it, right? The school of hard knocks, so to speak. But sharing back and forth. Schools, and what I love about our relationship side and the networks that we have with ACSI and these other organizations is that we don't all have it figured out. The more we can rely on each other and borrow things, I mean, it's so great to visit schools and see what God's doing in a completely different way, and honoring that is just absolutely amazing. And so there again, I appreciate you having me on. I love our relationship, us getting to sit down and talk about things and looking towards the future and how do we challenge each other. So really appreciate you having me today.
Oh, thank you. Thank you again. Yeah, kudos to you. Doing great work and totally agree. It's been a fun ride and so glad we're in this together, and just been great to talk to you about this. And I do hope some people follow up, because I know that if you follow up with Darin Long, he's going to get back to you. It's going to be well worth your time. And you do need to connect with schools like Christian Academy of Louisville, because they're doing a lot of things really, really well. And so a lot of our listeners would really benefit from just watching you and modeling some of their leadership after you, and then also obviously some of the things you've put in at Christian Academy of Louisville. So thank you again. Well, let me make 2 chalkboard points for you to consider as listeners worth remembering from today's episode. Point number 1 is, listen, if Christian schools are going to thrive in this moment, then they've got to be well-run organizations that deliver both an excellent education and an extraordinary partnership experience for their families and employees. Excellence takes time. We talked about that. But if you consistently focus on this standard and there are good accountability measures in place, it will happen. Providing an extraordinary partnership experience with families is achievable right now. It just takes intentionality and determination. Chalkboard point number 2. Regardless of how large your organization becomes, leaders cannot lose sight of how they make their people feel. When people feel seen and heard, they connect with our schools in a meaningful way. This connection leads to a relationship that breeds loyalty, a relationship that can withstand the ups and downs of a child's education. Our schools won't be perfect, and neither will our families and students. But feeling uniquely valued gives us the grace that we need to stay the course and achieve success with each child. Well, that's our lesson for today, and now you know more. When you know more, you can do more. You can not only think differently, but you can act differently. You can make that change, live out your convictions, and you can say no more if you must. Well, again, thank you for joining me today on the Clearly Christian podcast, and I trust that now you know more about acting smaller even as you get bigger. And again, if you like the show today, again, let us know, following along, subscribing, hit that like button for me. That let others know, again, the show is worth checking out, and it makes a difference. I would certainly appreciate that. Well, as I close, remember, the only way we're going to turn things around in our country is to increase the number of people who hold a biblical worldview. And the greatest hope we have to get there is Christian education. Again, I'm Dr. Cy Smith for Clearly Christian.
Thank you for listening to the Clearly Christian podcast with Dr. Cy Smith. Hear more episodes at clearlychristianeducation.com. If you'd like more information about Christian education in your neighborhood, or if you're interested in education opportunities at Mansfield Christian School, or if you agree with Dr. Smith and want to help him in his mission to influence and awaken Christian America, you can send Dr. Smith an email through the clearlychristianeducation.com website. Message him on the Clearly Christian LinkedIn or Facebook page, or call the Clearly Christian Connection line at 419-756-5651. This has been the Clearly Christian Podcast with Dr. Cy Smith on clearlychristianeducation.com, brought to you in conjunction with Mansfield Christian School, a Bryan Media production.